After we graduated high school, my friends and I wanted one last adventure before college split us up. There were 5 of us: me, Josh, Eli, Marcus, and the twins, Sarah and Sam. We pooled our savings and booked cheap flights to Budapest, Hungary. The city was famous for its nightlife, old castles, and especially its network of old drainage tunnels and ruin bars built in abandoned places. We'd seen YouTube videos about urban explorers going into these tunnels and thought it would be a wild story to bring home. We spent the first few days sightseeing, eating street food, and staying at a hostel near the Danube. On our 4th day, we met a group of local students at a bar. When we mentioned the tunnels, one of them, Victor, said he knew an entrance near an abandoned factory on the city's outskirts. He warned us that the tunnels weren't exactly legal to enter, but as long as we were careful and quiet, no one would care. He even offered to show us the way. The next afternoon, we took the tram to the edge of the city. The area was run-down graffiti on every wall, broken windows, stray cats everywhere. Victor led us behind a crumbling brick building to a rusty storm drain cover. He pried it open, and we climbed down a metal ladder into the darkness. The air was cool and damp, and the only light came from our headlamps. At first, it was thrilling. The tunnel was about 6 feet high and wide enough for us to walk side by side. The walls were covered in old graffiti, and our footsteps echoed off the damp concrete. We joked, took photos, and tried to spook each other with stories about what might be down there. After about 30 minutes, we reached a fork. Victor said the right tunnel led to a dead end, while the left went deeper under the city. We took the left. The tunnel sloped downward and the air got colder. At one point, we passed a pile of old blankets and empty bottles. Someone had been living down here. That made us uneasy, but Victor said it was common for homeless people to take shelter in the tunnels during cold months. We kept going, but then heard voices echoing from up ahead, angry and urgent in Hungarian. Victor motioned for us to keep quiet. We turned off our lights and crouched behind a bend. 2 men, both in dirty clothes, were arguing. One was holding a crowbar, the other was dragging a heavy duffel bag. They stopped under a shaft of light from a broken grate above and started pulling something out of the bag. We couldn't see what it was, but it looked heavy and wrapped in a tarp. Suddenly, one of the men looked up and shined his flashlight straight at us. We froze, blinded for a second. He shouted, and the other man dropped the bag and started running toward us, crowbar raised. Victor yelled for us to run. In the chaos, we split. Up Eli and I went left, the twins and Marcus went right. Victor stayed behind to try and talk to the men. Eli and I sprinted through the darkness, heart pounding, slipping on the wet concrete. We could hear footsteps behind us. One of the men was chasing us, shouting in Hungarian. We ducked into a side tunnel and killed our lights, pressing ourselves against the wall. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. We held our breath, listening to the man curse and eventually walk away. We waited 10 minutes before moving. Our phones had no signal, but we used the compass app to try and head back toward where we'd entered. Every shadow looked like someone waiting to jump out. We passed more evidence of people living down here. Old shoes, a broken radio, a pile of cigarette butts. At one point, we heard a distant scream, but couldn't tell if it was one of our friends or just the sound echoing through the tunnels. After what felt like hours, we found a ladder leading up to a rusty grate. We pushed it open and climbed out into a quiet alley. We were filthy, shaking, and completely lost. We called the others. Marcus answered. He and the twins had gotten out a few blocks away and were hiding in a bus shelter. Victor had made it out too, but he'd been punched in the face and had a bloody nose. We met up at a cafe and tried to piece together what happened. Victor said the men were probably part of a gang using the tunnels to stash stolen goods. He'd tried to talk them down, but they'd threatened him and told him never to come back. The bag, he said, looked like it was full of stolen electronics, maybe laptops or phones. The next day we saw a news story about a tourist who'd gone missing in the tunnels a week before. Police had found a stash of stolen goods and arrested 2 men. The photo of one was the guy with the crowbar. We realized how close we'd come to being robbed, or worse. We never told our parents the real story. But every time I see a storm drain now, I think about those tunnels, the echo of footsteps behind us, and how lucky we were to get out. My name's Kevin, and last spring, my neighbors, the Wangs, asked me to house sit while they took their kids to Florida for spring break. Their house was the nicest on our street big, with a fenced backyard, a fancy security system, and a golden retriever named Daisy. Mrs. Wang was super organized. She left a binder of instructions and reminded me to keep every door and window locked at all times, especially at night. She said there had been a couple of burglaries in the area lately. I promised to be careful. The first few days were easy. I fed Daisy, watered the plants, and spent most of my time watching Netflix in their living room. The Wang's house felt different from mine. Everything was spotless, the furniture was modern, and the kitchen was full of gadgets I didn't know how to use. I liked the change of scenery, and Daisy was good company, always wagging her tail and following me around. By the third night, I was bored out of my mind. I texted my friends Tyler and Ben to come over. I knew the Wangs said not to have people over, but I figured as long as we didn't make a mess, it would be fine. We'd just hang out, play video games, and order pizza. They came over around 8. We played Mario Kart, joked around, and watched a horror movie. At some point, Ben went out to the backyard to smoke and came back in through the sliding door. I remember thinking I should double-check the lock, but I got distracted when Daisy started barking at the TV. We ended up staying up late, talking about college plans and telling stories about teachers we hated. Around midnight, Tyler left first, then Ben. I walked Ben out through the kitchen and saw that the sliding door was still open a crack. I pulled it shut and locked it, but something about the way it slid felt off, like maybe it hadn't latched properly earlier. I did a quick check of the other doors and windows before heading to bed. I was pretty sure I locked everything, but I was tired and didn't double-check every window. The next morning, Daisy woke me up barking like crazy. I went downstairs and saw the sliding door was cracked open again. My stomach dropped. I looked around, and at first, nothing seemed out of place. But when I went into the office, I noticed the laptop that had been on the desk was gone. I checked the rest of the house and realized the back gate was open too. I called the police and the Wangs. The cops came and took fingerprints, but they said it was probably someone who had been chasing the neighborhood for an easy target. The officer told me that most burglaries happen because of unlocked doors or windows, and that the thief was probably in and out in less than 5 minutes. The rest of the day was a blur. I felt sick to my stomach. I kept replaying the night before, wondering if I'd heard anything, if I'd seen anyone outside. I remembered hearing a car drive by late, but I hadn't thought anything of it. When the Wangs called, I could hear the disappointment in Mrs. Wang's voice. She said the laptop was old and backed up, but I could tell she was upset. Mr. Wang just asked if Daisy was okay and said not to worry about the laptop, but I still felt responsible. That afternoon, I went around the house checking every lock and window. In the backyard, I noticed muddy footprints leading from the gate to the sliding door. There was also a cigarette butt near the fence Ben's brand, but he always put them in the trash. This one looked fresh, like someone had been standing there watching the house. I barely slept that night. Every noise made me jump. Daisy barked at the slightest sound. I kept the lights on in the hallway and checked the security camera feed every hour. The next day, I talked to some neighbors. One of them, Mrs. Patel, said she'd seen a white van parked down the street late at night. She thought it was just a delivery van, but now she wasn't sure. A week later, one of the neighbors caught a guy on their security camera trying to open car doors on the street. The police said it was probably the same person who hit the Wang's house. They never found the laptop, but nothing else happened after that. When the Wangs returned, I apologized again. They told me not to worry, but I could tell they were more careful after that extra locks on the doors, new motion lights in the backyard. I still house sit sometimes, but I always double-check every lock now. And I never invite friends over without asking. It's not worth the risk. The worst part was knowing that a simple mistake, forgetting to check a door, could cause so much trouble. I still think about that week every time I lock up at night, and I always wonder if the person who broke in was watching us the whole time, just waiting for someone to slip up. My name's Darren. Last March, during spring break, my 2 roommates went home to see their families, but I stayed behind in our college dorm. I had a part-time job at the campus library and couldn't afford to miss a week's pay. The dorms were almost empty, and the campus was eerily quiet. No music, no shouting, just the hum of the vending machines and the occasional echo of footsteps in the halls. The first few days were fine. I got ahead on my assignments, played video games, and enjoyed having the place to myself. I even cooked real meals for once instead of living off ramen. But by Wednesday, I started to notice things that felt off. Someone had left a half-eaten sandwich on the bench outside our building, and the trash cans near the side. Entrants were overflowing with stuff I didn't recognize. Empty cans, dirty blankets, and a couple of old shoes. That night, I stayed up late watching movies. Around 1 a.m., I heard a weird scraping sound outside my window. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe a branch, but then I heard it again, closer this time. I peeked through the blinds and saw a guy I'd never seen before, maybe in his 40s, wearing a dirty jacket and carrying a backpack. He was trying the door handles on the ground floor. I watched as he circled the building, stopping at each window and door. He didn't seem drunk or high, just desperate. At one point, he looked up and saw me watching. He stared for a few seconds, then moved on. I called campus security and told them what I saw. They said they'd send someone over, but it took almost half an hour for a guard to show up. By then, the guy was gone. The next day, I told the RA, who said there had been a few incidents lately with homeless, people sneaking into the dorms to sleep or look for food. He told me to keep my door locked and let him know if I saw anything else. That night I heard noises again, this time from inside the building. Someone was rattling the doorknob to our suite. I texted my roommate, who reminded me to use the extra lock on our door. I sat on my bed, heart pounding, listening as footsteps moved down the hall, pausing at each door. Eventually the footsteps faded. I stayed up until sunrise, too nervous to sleep. The next morning, security found a broken window in the laundry room and a pile of blankets stuffed behind the dryers. Whoever it was, they'd been sleeping there for at least a couple nights. On Thursday, I decided to walk the halls and see if I noticed anything else. The building was old, with creaky floors and doors that never quite shut right. On the third floor, I found a pile of empty food wrappers and a half-full bottle of water in the stairwell. Someone had definitely been living in the building. I reported it to the RA, who said he'd let campus police know. That night, I was on edge. I kept my phone charged and close by, and I set up a chair by the door so I'd hear if anyone tried to get in. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and shuffling. I peeked through the peephole and saw the same guy from before, looking tired and dirty. He tried the handle, then moved on. I called campus security again. This time they arrived quickly and found the guy in the laundry room, curled up behind the dryers. They escorted him out, but I couldn't help but feel bad for him. He didn't seem dangerous, just desperate. The next day, the RA told me that the man had been picked up by local authorities. He was well known in the area, usually harmless, but sometimes broke into buildings for a place to sleep. The school fixed the broken window and started locking the side entrances at night. My roommates came back that weekend, and I told them everything. They were freaked out, but glad nothing worse happened. I realized how easy it was for someone to slip in when no one was around, and how vulnerable you can feel when you're the only one left. Now, every spring break, I make sure I'm not the only one left in the dorms. It's not just the quiet that's unsettling. It's knowing how easy it is for someone to slip in when no one's around. I always double-check the locks, and I never ignore strange noises anymore. That week taught me that sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters. They're just other people, desperate and alone, looking for a way in.